Hello, people of the internet. I had a random idea. I really used to love being read to when I was a kid and indeed as an adult. And I thought, wouldn't it be awesome if I just read a chapter of one of my favourite books to the internet? Now I know it's not an audiobook, it's not professional production or anything like that, but I thought it might be quite nice, sort of like sitting in a pub or a bar where people used to do stories and story readings, and actually just reading a chapter. So it's going to be a live reading, which means obviously I'm going to make quite a few mistakes and bits and pieces are going to happen, but you know, maybe that'll add to the character or something. I hope so. I've chosen a book I absolutely love and I really want to share because it's just so well written. It's fantastic. It's got a really great sense of environment and of itself. It's Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad, which of course is a very famous book from quite some time ago now, well over 100 years I believe. Yeah, and it's an absolutely fantastic book. The interesting thing about Joseph Conrad as an author is that he's actually Polish by birth, and he learnt English when he came to England to travel on the Merchant Navy. He travelled a great deal all around the world. Indeed, he went into Africa himself, and the book, Heart of Darkness, is actually based on his own diaries, the Congo diaries, that he kept when he was travelling in Africa and travelling in the Congo, which was then, of course, a Belgian colony, and not far from French and British colonies in the north and in the east. Conrad's a bit of an interesting writer because he's read by everybody of significance. Ernest Hemingway famously said that it was a very popular opinion amongst him and his friends that Joseph Conrad couldn't write and was a bad writer, but he loved his books all the same. Bertrand Russell, the famous philosopher, also really loved Conrad's work and chose Heart of Darkness as his favourite Conrad story. So anyway, with all that, I just thought I'd do this. If anybody enjoys it, or you like it, or you're interested in this book, or indeed in the idea of just me reading a chapter to camera every now and again, please share the book, and as in the video, and please give it some likes or some comments. Or if you've got any suggestions for books you'd like me to read, then please do. Maybe it's just something nice to have on in the background while you're working, or you know, doing something else. Who knows? It's a social experiment, reading to the internet. So let's find out. Like I say, it's live, so I might make a few mistakes and bits, and I do apologise for that in advance. Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad, Chapter 1. The Nelly, a cruising yawl, swung to her anchor without a flutter of the sails, and was at rest. The flood had made, the wind was nearly calm, and being bound down the river, the only thing for it was to come to, and wait for the turn of the tide. The sea reach of the Thames stretched before us like the beginning of an interminable waterway. In the offing, the sea and the sky were welded together without a joint, and in the luminous space the tanned sails of the barges, drifting up with the tide, seemed to stand still in red clusters of canvas sharply peaked, with gleams of varnished sprits. A haze rested on the low shores that ran out to sea in vanishing flatness. The air was dark above Gravesend, and farther back still seemed condensed into a mournful gloom, brooding, motionless, over the biggest and the greatest town on earth. The director of companies was our captain and our host. We four affectionately watched his back as he stood in the bows, looking to seaward. On the whole river there was nothing that looked half so nautical. He resembled a pilot, which to a seaman is trustworthiness personified. It was difficult to realise his work was not out there in the luminous estuary, but behind him, within the brooding gloom. Between us there was, as I have already said somewhere, the bond of the sea. Besides holding our hearts together through long periods of separation, it had the effect of making us tolerant of each other's yarns, and even convictions. The lawyer, the best of old fellows, had, because of his many years and many virtues, the only cushion on deck, and was lying on the only rug. The accountant had brought out already a box of dominoes, and was toying architecturally with the bones. Marlowe sat cross-legged right aft, leaning against the mizzenmast. He had sunken cheeks, a yellow complexion, a straight back, an ascetic aspect, and with his arms dropped, the palms of hands outward, resembled an idol. The director, satisfied the anchor had good hold, made his way aft and sat down amongst us. We exchanged a few words lazily. Afterwards, there was silence on board the yacht. For some reason or other, we did not begin that game of dominoes. We felt meditative and fit for nothing but placid staring. The day was ending in a serenity of still and exquisite brilliance. The water shone pacifically. The sky, without a speck, was a benign immensity of unstained light. The very mist on the Essex marshes was like a gauzy and radiant fabric, hung from the wooded rises inland, and draping the low shores in diaphanous folds. Only the gloom to the west, brooding over the upper reaches, became more sombre every minute, as if angered by the approach of the sun. And at last, in its curved and imperceptible fall, the sun sank low, and from glowing white changed to a dull red, without rays and without heat, as if about to go out suddenly, stricken to death by the touch of that gloom brooding over a crowd of men. Forthwith, a change came over the waters, and the serenity became less brilliant, but more profound. The old river in its broad reach rested unruffled at the decline of day. After ages of good service done to the race that peopled its banks, spread out in the tranquil dignity of a waterway, leading to the uttermost ends of the earth. We looked at the venerable stream, not in the vivid flush of a short day that comes and departs forever, but in the august light of abiding memories. And indeed, nothing is easier for a man who has, as the phrase goes, followed the sea with reverence and affection, than to evoke the great spirit of the past upon the lower reaches of the Thames. The tidal current runs to and fro in its unceasing service, crowded with memories of men and ships it had borne to the rest of home or to the battles of the sea. It had known and served all the men of whom the nation is proud, from Sir Francis Drake to Sir John Franklin, knights all, titled and untitled, the great knights-errant of the sea. It had borne all the ships whose names are like jewels flashing in the night of time, from the Golden Hind, returning with her round flanks full of treasure, to be visited by the Queen's Highness, and thus pass out of the gigantic tale, to the Erebus and Terror, bound on other conquests, and that never returned. It had known the ships and the men. They had sailed from Deptford, from Greenwich, from Erith, the adventurers and the settlers, king's ships, and the ships of men, on change, captains, admirals, the dark interlopers of the Eastern trade, and the commissioned generals of East India fleets. Hunters for gold, or pursuers of fame, they had gone out on that stream, bearing the sword and often the torch, messengers of the might within the land, bearers of a spark from the sacred fire. What greatness had not floated on the ebb of that river and into the mystery of an unknown earth? The dreams of men, the seed of commonwealths, the germs of empires. Okay, I'll hold it there for a second, because those of you who are bored have probably already got bored and gone, and the others of you need to know if this is fun or not. So I hope you enjoyed that tiny little bit from Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. If you're interested in seeing any more, then please just like the video or share it or drop me a comment, and I'll gladly record some more of this book, because it's genuinely one of my favourites. And our social experiment of reading to the internet can continue. But yes, thank you very much for your time and attention if you've made it this far, and I hope your own journey is not into a heart of darkness.